Have you ever laughed so hysterically at something so simple you were starting to get legitimately worried that you were losing your sanity or something? Part 2. I was watching an episode of Monty Python where at the end of the sketch the outline of the muscles in the body on a chart in the background popped out of the chart, turned into Python Bison, and started walking to the right. He continued walking past flowers, birds, and other cartoon scenes before falling off the end of the movie film. It was so unexpected I started laughing for at least 5 minutes straight. One night shift we found ourselves down a rabbit hole of Amazon reviews. There were a lot of reviews about fake fruit, but the one fake lemon had the worst reviews for being too small. We laughed until we cried. Lunch break at work. Pulled out a glass bottle of sparkling water and opened it. Apparently it got shaken too much in my bag and the cap just exploded out of my hand and bounced off the ceiling, leaving me and everyone at my table drenched in water. I laughed the entire time it took to mop up, and I still grin like a little idiot whenever I think about it. That song "Oh That Smell. Can't You Smell That Smell" came on the radio and my husband quietly said "Did she fart or something" to himself. He didn't even mean for it to be funny. I think he just thought the song was dumb. I died laughing and am cracking up right now thinking about it, and it was like 8 years ago. We had a chapel service during school in which our vice principal was being interviewed about the importance of prayer. I told my friends to imagine her saying masturbate every time she said pray. She continues to say that the moment she wakes up, she prays. Then she prays with her husband. They'll often walk out in the garden and pray. She actually has a book full of students' names and pictures, and often prays thinking of each of us individually. Could not breathe from silent laughter the entire service. EDA, apostrophe. My sister, who is 6 years younger than me, say "you can't catch me" and promptly ran into the base of a slide. All the other people at the playground to see a 7-year-old crying and a teenager laughing maniacally. I got yelled at pretty good, but totally worth it. It didn't even look that funny, but due some reason I found it so hilarious. I was telling my son how he was the glue that held his dad and I together at times. Then I said we should have named you Elmer. I was crying from laughing and couldn't stop. My son and husband were just looking at me like I was crazy. It has been brought up a few times since and I laughed just as hard, and yes, I'm laughing now. My wife and I was in the shower one night and my back was to the shower head and I farted so loud and long, and because the water was hitting my back/butt it sounded like I was drowning Daffy Duck. The more I thought about it the harder and longer I laughed. I farted really loudly while my girlfriend was sleeping. She woke up in a panic and yelled "What the hell," and I still have fits of laughter 3 years later. I was reading a series of dad jokes back to back to my husband. Each punchline I was finding more progressively funny. Finally, I reached one joke that pushed me over the edge. Where does the general put his armies? His sleeve-eyes. I fucking lost it. Wheezing. Couldn't breathe. I'd start to regain composure, remember the joke, and start laughing again. When my twin brother and I were younger, we were arguing about something, big surprise. My brother goes to mock me for whatever I said. But instead of saying blah blah blah, he said blah blah bluff. We laughed so fucking hard I almost peed myself. We laughed for at least 20 minutes. So much so that my mom got angry at us. For weeks afterwards we would burst out laughing every time we made eye contact. Just thinking about the classic blah blah bluff. Back in elementary school one day I started laughing at my friend's voice impression. There was something about it that I just couldn't stop laughing for 3 or 4 classes. Never laughed so much in my life again. I was shredding some cheese for enchiladas onto a paper plate. And I was being a little rough with the grater and my roommate came out and he was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "You know, cooking." He came over and looked at the plate and I just said "cheese plate." We both stopped for probably 15 seconds and immediately started laughing wildly. And for the whole night we sat around quietly, but would start giggling about the cheese plate. In 7th grade me and my friend found a painting of a man harvesting corn funny. I don't know why, but it was hilarious. My friend from Sweden was telling me about her uncle, who drove to Amsterdam and accidentally bought a horse. Except I misheard because of her Swedish accent. I heard whore. And she continues on. About how her uncle had to sneak this whore home and hide it from his wife. Then eventually had to fess up and build a barn to keep the whore in. And figured. Since he already had one. Why not 12? And he developed a whore training school. I got increasingly confused until the barn bit. When I had to stop her for clarification. And then we all fell apart. My hound dog walking in boots in the snow for the first time. She forgot how her knees worked and walked with her legs dead straight and swinging out in a wide arc to the side. Happened earlier today actually. My brother got me a 1:2 scale F1 helmet replica for my favorite driver. I found that the helmet fit a plush Snoopy I've had since childhood. The size of the helmet on the plush's tiny Snoopy body makes me laugh like crazy for some reason. I was driving through the country with my friend and we saw a group of cows standing in a cluster in the field. My friend said it was a cow mosh pit. I screamed it's a moosh pit. And almost had to pull over because I started crying laughing. It was so dumb. I loved it. You guys remember that scene from SpongeBob where a kid is crying and says he didn't want pistachio and the dad shouts, "Then why did you ask for it?" Well, one of my friends said that out of nowhere and I belly laughed for a good 15 minutes. I had my best friend in high school over for a sleepover and my mom had fallen asleep on the couch while we were all hanging out. My little brother, who was around 10 at the time, thought it would be funny to grab my mom's hair dryer, stand over her sleeping body, point the hair dryer at her, and yell, "Where were you on the night of the murder?" startling her awake. That was enough to send us into hysterics, but what made it even better was her reaction of shaking her head, slowly sitting up and telling my brother, "Okay, time for bed," in her tiredest voice. My best friend and I spent the next 10 minutes rolling around on the floor laughing and screaming. I had a dream recently that a friend of mine spent 2 full hours focusing intensely hard on writing something down. When he was finally finished, he showed it to me. In a 5-year-old's handwriting in crayon. The page simply read apple cider dog nuts. I laughed so hard I woke myself up crying. My boyfriend sneezed and farted at the same time. I started giggling. And then he let out this quiet, almost offended sounding ow. I completely fucking lost it. Fell over on my side. Tears streaming laughter. Then he dropped the "it's not funny," which immediately made it funnier. I'm trying not to laugh just writing about it. Wet soup. Just the idea of going into a restaurant, asking how the soup is and being told wet. My wife, then girlfriend, and I were on the bus. A couple of stoners got on the bus and randomly one of them said, "Dude, what if somebody made medical marijuana that gave you superpowers?" My girlfriend nearly died laughing. She tried to stay somewhat quiet to not be rude, but she failed. The stoners continued to talk about this and what kind of powers they would want for the whole bus ride. Imitates taking a hit, I have munchy vision. Which only made her laughing fits worse. Her laughing fit eventually caused me to laugh uncontrollably. And it's just like a self-sustaining fusion reaction at that point. I legit almost died, I'm pretty sure, playing a video game. One of my wife's favorite games is Shenmue. Originally released on the Dreamcast in 1999, it plays like an early prototype for games like Yakuza or Sleeping Dogs. But it was very crude by any modern standard. It's quite bad, I would say, in fact. But in a so bad it's good sorta way. Which is very rare for video games. They put out a remaster a couple years ago and she had me play through it while she watched. She wanted to see what I thought of it. The plot revolves around the main character investigating his father's murder. He does this mostly by wandering around town and just asking random people on the street questions, hoping it will somehow help. At one point he gets a lead that something might be going on at the docks. The main character, who isn't too bright, thinks, "Hey, sailors work at the docks. I should talk to some sailors. So do you go to the docks?" No, that would make too much sense. Instead, as you wander around town aimlessly, you can ask people, "Do you know where I could find some sailors?" Over and over again. It started to get pretty funny. Just asking random people for sailors constantly. Well, at one point my wife went to the bathroom and I stopped to look at the in-game journal. It's where the game keeps all your notes of things you've learned. But they're all written in faux handwriting as if the main character wrote himself a note. I flip it open and the only thing on the current page in big letters is "Must find sailors." I completely lost it. We'd already kinda been laughing about the search for sailors for like an hour, and when that popped up it was like the last straw and something in my head broke. I was completely hysterical with laughter. I couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe. It started to hurt. That only made me laugh harder, and I was starting to worry I was going to pass out. My wife walked back in from the bathroom and was very confused. She was just in time to see my cat, who had been curled up on the couch next to me, start to yowl and swat at me. Apparently my lunatic laughter had unnerved him. "What's so funny?" she asked. I gestured weakly toward the screen with the still open journal and managed to wheeze out "Must find sailors," as I fell into another fit of laughter. It was a good 5 to 10 minutes before I was coherent. "Must find sailors" is still a nice little private joke between us. I was air frying a frozen chicken patty. When I opened it up to take it out, the patty was flying around spinning like a coin. I couldn't breathe for about 10 minutes. Thanks for watching.